Hello again to you all. I do hope you enjoyed your Easter break and the fine weather we've been experiencing. Well, some of the time anyway. This is Maggie West presenting podcast number 49. For those of you I know who like to keep track. As always, it's a pleasure to have you join me for our April episode. A little tiny bit later than usual due to the Easter break. But our reporters have been out there and they've been busy. And today I have 3 interviews to tell you about over the next 30 minutes. So stay tuned. You'll hear about an amazing lady who was instrumental in helping to break the Enigma code at Bletchley Park.
Probably less because we didn't know the complexity of the Enigma machine. We never realized how infinitely difficult it was to break that code. And so although we were very proud of being part of the war effort, the actual breaking of the Enigma, we never realized.
You'll also learn about why do we have seasons?
The seasons on Earth exist because of a tilt in the Earth's axis. So the north to south pole are tilted at an angle of about 23.5 degrees.
And finally, how one Guernsey family kept a secret for many, many years.
It's joyous. I was really, really pleased to find that, particularly if you haven't been brought up together and yet you look alike, you share mannerisms and so on. It's interesting as well as exciting.
Please do keep me company. It will be worth your while. So let's find out more. As we prepare to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the ending of World War II, we're going to step back in time to hear from a woman who played a vital role in one of history's greatest intelligence operations, breaking the Enigma code at Bletchley Park. She worked with the bomb machine, helping to decipher German military messages in total secrecy. She only learned decades later the true impact of her work. She's now aged 98. Ruth Bourne is a member of the Barnet u3a group. Susie Hodges caught up with Ruth recently and began by asking what special skills she had, which explained why she'd been chosen for this top secret job.
Well, I had gained an entrance to London University to read English. During my time at school, I'd had lessons in German and Spanish, and I'd also been for a short time in Switzerland, so quite good at French. And perhaps that's why they thought I might be useful.
So tell us a little bit about your job. You said it alternated between operating the code-breaking machine known as the bomb and also checking what was coming out. Can you explain briefly what that entailed?
Well, the bomb machine was invented by Turing to break the Enigma. The Enigma had a certain setup of wheels and wires, and the bomb machine was to replicate. So this machine could go through the possible settings in 15 minutes, in my case, of 36 different Enigma machines. The bomb machine gave certain results. So there was another little room with checking machines, and you could take your results to the checking machine and check them, because the bomb would stop many times during the quarter of an hour run, and some of them would be useless stops and some of them would be good ones. And you had to check and not send useless ones to the code breakers, only send the good ones on a small red telephone voice scrambler. So that's what I would be doing. One day I would be operating the bomb, and on the second day I'd be checking the bomb.
I gather you weren't told anything about the real purpose of your job, except that the operation was aimed at trying to break German codes. But what were your feelings about it? Was there a sense of pride? Because you must have sensed it was important work.
Yes, important. Pride, probably less, because we didn't know the complexity of the Enigma machine. we never realized how infinitely difficult it was to break that code. And so although we were very proud of being part of the war effort, the actual breaking of the Enigma, we never realized. Now, of course, we do, because it was an incredible feat by the mathematicians and scholars and Turing, of course, and his code breakers.
What was the atmosphere like at your workplace? Was it friendly? Was it very strict? Hard work?
Both. It was very strict because we were in the Navy, and because nobody knew what we were doing, except those of us who were actually inside the secret, as it were, we had to do all the naval chores as well as working the very demanding shifts. So we would be working mornings one week, afternoon another week. The third week we'd be working at night. So we were very tired. But despite that, we had to scrub the floors and have our kit inspected and do fire watching duties, because that was arduous enough if you weren't working shifts. But some people got very tired and had to have a couple of weeks off to recuperate.
And what did you do when you did get that spare time, those days off?
Well, it took a month to go through all the different watches, morning, afternoon, evening, so on. And then we got 4.5 days free to go home and demand to be pampered and ask my mother for my breakfast in bed.
But you had to keep it all secret from your family and your friends. How difficult was that?
Very. My mother was saying, oh, well, you can tell me I'm your mother kind of thing. And I said, well, it was confidential secretarial work. And that's all she ever got to know. I think she was a bit miffed.
I can imagine. How did you feel when you learned, many decades later, you said 30, about the real importance of your job, which of course shortened the war, they say, by 2 years and saved millions of lives?
Yes, I found out because somebody wrote a book about it called The Ultra Secret. And I spoke to my husband and said, well, this is what I did in the war. It was involved in breaking German Enigma machine codes. He wasn't very interested in it. That's very interesting, dear. What's for tea? And that was the end of that. But eventually, as little by little, the information came out, and Bletchley Park was very interested in trying to open up the park, and I became a volunteer there. And so I learned more and more and more as I trained to become a guide. And I was a guide there eventually for 24 years.
Wow. And what were your feelings when you were awarded France's highest honour, the Légion d'honneur, for your work?
Well, to be honest, if you want to know, when the information came that I was going to get that, I thought it was a scam, saying they don't give medals to bomb operators. But eventually I did ascertain that it was for real, and I was very, very honoured and proud and lucky to get such a wonderful honour.
Richly deserved, I would say. And what lasting memories do you think your wartime experience taught you?
It taught me to be disciplined. Naval time is 5 minutes beforehand. And it taught me how to grow up. I came straight from school, the sixth form, into this very adult atmosphere. So it was a very maturing experience.
This year marks the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. What were your feelings when you heard that the Allies had won the war after Germany had surrendered?
Well, we were very delighted and absolutely over the moon when it was VE Day. My friends and I went into London and the atmosphere was electric. Everybody was happy, and many of us, including me, gathered outside Buckingham Palace and shouted, "We want the king, we want the king." And the royal family did eventually turn up on the famous balcony, and we all cheered. People climbed up lampposts. V Day was amazing. VJ Day was different because that was truly the war was over. And at that time, I and another wren, we rushed out into the road outside the barracks and we stopped a car. We waved and said, VJ, the war in Japan is over. Come and have a cup of tea, which was all we could offer in the way of celebration. This bewildered driver got out of his car and we had a cup of tea. And then subsequently, my friend and I went into London again when our free pass came up. And there were bonfires in Hyde Park. There was an American group who got some benches and set fire to them. We had a bonfire and we were singing some patriotic songs and local songs and rude songs. It was really an electric atmosphere.
That was an incredible insight into the untold work of the codebreakers at Bletchley Park, an effort that helped shorten the war and save millions of lives. Thanks to Ruth Bourne for speaking to Susie Hodges about her top secret wartime job. What a fascinating story. Have you ever wondered why do we have seasons? Or how frogs know when it's time to wake up? This episode dives into the natural rhythm of life on Earth, exploring how the Earth's tilt brings us summer and winter, and how that changing light and warmth affects wildlife right on our doorstep. Let's look at the quiet resilience of creatures emerging from winter and the small things we can do in our gardens to help them thrive.
Very interested to know a little bit about the seasons and why we have the seasons. Could you just explain why that is, please?
Yes, it's the seasons on Earth exist because of a tilt in the Earth's axis. So the north to south pole are tilted at an angle of about 23.5 degrees. It varies very slightly from year to year, but that's the tilt. And as a result, when the Earth rotates around the sun, one hemisphere is pointing more towards the sun and gets greater sunlight and greater energy from the sun. And also the day length in that season is longer in summer when the hemisphere is pointing towards the sun. And now, of course, we're moving towards the northern hemisphere summer, and day lengths are getting longer. And we're getting past the point when the day is as long as the night in our hemisphere, and likewise in our winter, the southern hemisphere gets the summer then. So it's a tilt, and it's actually quite a coincidence, or you may even believe in a design that 23.5 degrees is just enough to make the seasons different, and not too much, because if it was tilted much more, the difference between summer and winter would be so great that living organisms would find a great deal of trouble coping with that difference.
The animals, and I'm thinking of amphibious animals like frogs and toads, who I believe have hibernated over winter. What makes them want to come out again, and when do they come out again? And the other question I've got is, if it's a fall spring, there's going to be more frosts than that. Does that affect them?
Yeah, I'll come back to you on hibernation, because there are only 3 groups of animals in the UK that actually hibernate, and there is a difference. Frogs and toads go into what's called a torpor, which means they can wake up when the conditions are favourable, and if they get worse again, they can go back into their sleep mode.
Oh, wow.
Now, the bats, and the other creatures which truly hibernate, if they come out of their hibernation, they can't go back. If a hedgehog is out early in the winter, it will not survive. It can't go back into hibernation. And that's the difference between hibernation and torpor. And so what's happening with the frogs is that they will appear earlier if there is a sunny day or succession of sunny days, and they'll think that they've got through the winter. With the birds, they are much more likely to arrive earlier in the spring than they've ever done before, and that's what's happening. And if the weather gets worse again, they're stuck without enough, especially if they're insect eaters, which a lot of our migrating birds are, because there's no insects to speak of during the winter. Yeah, well, while we're talking about torpor, we see early in the spring some of our early flying butterflies, including species like peacocks and tortoiseshells, which actually they overwinter as an adult, and they go into a torpor and will come out of torpor if they have a fine day, and then hopefully that early in the year they can find the nectar plants that they need to feed on. So they are another species which you can see very early in the year. But once again, if the weather gets really bad, they have to go back into torpor, and that might not be. They might not be able to survive that. Butterfly numbers are in serious decline all over the UK because of the absence of the habitats, but also, I think, personally, the impact of climate change and changing weather patterns.
If we've got any u3a members who are they like their gardens, what sort of things can they do to encourage wildlife?
Yeah, wildlife gardening is a really interesting subject. There are certain things that have been well publicised about wildlife gardens. So the catchphrase, for example, "no mow May," is incredibly useful. We have this thing that we want our gardens to be immaculate, tidy, there's no litter, no rubbish, no dead plants. Yet those are the things that actually feed a lot of the wildlife. So the other thing about gardening is to concentrate wherever you can on using native species in your garden. Lots of ornamental plants are from overseas, and if they spill out into the wild environment, can cause a huge amount of problems. Japanese knotweed being one example of a plant which, when it gets into the river basins, can wreck the habitat, quite literally, and also can wreck your house as well if you're not careful. So it's no longer legal to actually sell knotweed, but other plants that you can use. Look into finding plants which give early season flowers so that they can be used by our insects as nectar sources for them to build up to their breeding season. And that's a very, very useful thing to do. There are lots of advice on wildlife gardening around the internet. I think the most useful thing you can do is keep a rubbish heap in the corner of your garden, especially over the winter. As leaf mould is a great place for animals to hide out in over the winter, and helping them to survive to the next breeding season. Aphids and other pest species.
If you had one thing that you wanted to sort of leave with our u3a listeners in terms of encouraging wildlife, just one thing, what would that be, Pete?
The one thing I say is actually just a single word, and that's enjoy. I use that word to say, get out into the countryside, see what you can see. There's no such thing as an expert. an expert, I've been told in the past, an ex is somebody you don't get on with, and a spurt is a broken tap. So experts don't exist. So you are as good an expert as anybody else. You go and enjoy it. Even if you have disabilities or mobility problems, visual problems, hearing problems, you can still enjoy the wildlife, and I believe it helps your sanity to get out for a few hours every week and enjoy the countryside.
So whether it's frogs waking from their winter sleep, butterflies on the wing, or simple changes in your garden, the message is clear. Take time to notice and enjoy the wildlife around you. It's precious. Imagine believing all your life that you were an only child and then finding out at the age of 57 that you had 2 older siblings after receiving an email out of the blue from a stranger. That was what happened to Jag Sherborne, a member of u3a Guernsey. She's written a book called The Clouds in My Guernsey Sky, which recounts this extraordinary discovery of the long-buried secrets in her family. It also describes the occupation of Guernsey by Nazi Germany and how this led to the forced separation of her parents during the war. Join us as we explore how her search for family led to uncovering not just new relatives, but a profound and heartbreaking history. Susie Hodges caught up with Jag recently and began by asking her to describe her feelings when she received that email out of the blue.
Well, the email didn't lead to 2 older siblings. It led to 1, and then quite a long time down the line, there was another one. So when the initial email came, it's very hard to articulate this. I was brought up as an only child, but I had always wanted siblings, and I'd always sort of pestered my parents for them. And in the back of my mind, there was always kind of some hope. It was almost as if I never quite lost hope of having one. And so when it arrived, and it was from a complete stranger, but I didn't dismiss it. I kind of thought, this is something I will pursue. So I did reply.
Okay, and then a lot further down the line, you met first one sibling and then the other. What were your feelings for each of those meetings?
Well, my parents had long since passed away, and the whole story is obviously, my whole journey is underpinned by their experience. And these 2 siblings were as a result of their wartime experience. And so the emotions are very mixed under those circumstances. I mean, it's not just finding out that you've got new siblings that you hadn't known anything about. It's also the whole kind of backstory that led to them that was actually really tragic. So there was great joy in it. There was a lot of sadness in it as well. It's a heartbreaking story, but it's also heartwarming. So excitement, sorrow for my parents, looking forward to the future, all of those kind of emotions.
You decided to write a book to retell this amazing story of long-buried family secrets coming to light. But the first part of your book talks about Nazi Germany's occupation of Guernsey and the other Channel Islands. How tough was the occupation?
Oh, well, the occupation was very tough. Now, when the Germans invaded, everything was cut off from the UK. I mean, after a few months, but it was nearly a year before my dad had any word from my mum at all. And then it was literally just 10 words that he heard from her, that she was safe and she was well, and that was it. So they were completely cut off. Half the population evacuated. And my mum was amongst that half that evacuated. She and Dad had decided to evacuate together, but Dad was an essential worker at the power station, so he couldn't just be released from his shift. So she went ahead with her sister, and the deal was that Dad was going to follow her. But on the 28th of June, the Germans bombed St. Peter Port Harbour. And 2 days after that, they arrived and everything was just cut off. And that was it. There was no way in or out after that. So it was very difficult for them in Guernsey, those who were occupied. They were getting supplies from Europe until D-Day. After D-Day, those supplies dried up. And so for the last year of the war, they relied on Red Cross parcels that were delivered on a monthly basis. And other than that, they would probably have starved. I mean, they were close to starvation at times. So it was really tough.
Did this discovery of your two half-sisters change in any way your opinion of your mother and father? They kept this secret from you all their lives. They obviously even must have gone to the trouble of destroying any evidence when it came to their deaths.
Yes, the letters between my parents after the war were redacted. So I have certain letters, but only one of them mentions a baby and only very slightly. So there must have been several that did mention a baby, but, I either haven't found them or Dad got rid of them because Mum died first. Does it change my view of them? I suppose it doesn't change it in a negative way. If anything, it changes it in a positive way. I do feel sad that Mum didn't feel able to tell me, but I do understand why she wouldn't have told me, because in those days, if you had babies out of wedlock, it was considered very shameful, whatever the circumstances. And obviously, I don't know what the circumstances were, their conception. I have no idea. Mothers were encouraged, and I know this because people have got in touch with me since I've written my book and said that, they were in similar situations. And they were told that they had to give their baby up and never, ever talk about it again. I suppose I feel very sad for both of them. I mean, I think my dad was absolutely amazing because he obviously accepted it.
Did your two sisters, Michelle and the older one, Pauline, as far as you know, did they have the same father? And if not, is anything known about these fathers?
I don't know. I do speculate in my book. My two sisters had very, very different upbringings and very different to me. And their situations are completely different from each other. So I speculate. I do speculate, but I don't know for sure.
And how would you describe your relationship with Pauline, your older sister, who is still alive?
Yeah, it's very good. We're very alike and we speak regularly, and I try and visit her each year when I'm in the UK. So yeah, it's good.
Coming back to your book, what was the main message you wished to convey by writing it?
Well, I suppose my main reason for writing it, I don't know about message, but my main reason for writing it is that a lot of women have buried stories because of past kind of society hypocritical morals in my view. And that's very painful. It must be terribly painful to bury those memories and have to feel that you have to take them with you to your grave. And I suppose, to me, times are much more forgiving in this kind of way. I mean, we do live in difficult times at the moment, obviously, but I think we are much more tolerant, and we understand as well how separation can lead to circumstances like this. So I feel that my parents didn't tell me. I think they may have worried that they might have lost me as well, which they wouldn't have done. But in telling their story, I hope that it kind of is putting things a little bit right from the past. I mean, I did worry each time I met my sisters. I worried that I was perhaps betraying my mum, particularly when I met my second sister, actually. And she was so warm and lovely about it that it made me feel that it was definitely the right thing to do to meet. And I hope that it's been the right thing to do to tell their story.
I mean, for somebody who's always thought they were an only child, in many ways, it must be wonderful to discover that you've got all those close relatives there.
Yeah, it is wonderful. It's joyous. I was really, really pleased to find that, particularly if you haven't been brought up together and yet you look alike, you share mannerisms and so on. It's interesting as well as exciting. Yeah, it's great, really great. My only sadness is that, my parents are not alive to share in it.
Now, this story reminds us of the powerful emotions tied to family. the impact of the past on our lives, and how sometimes the most unexpected discoveries bring us closer to the people we were meant to find. I hope you found today's episode as moving as I did. That was Jag Sherborne speaking about her long-lost family to Susie Hodges. And if you want to read the full book, her story in the book is The Clouds in My Guernsey Sky. It's available through Blue Ormer and costs £9.99. Very enlightening and varied episode, don't you think? I so enjoy these interviews, and I do hope it's the same for you, and they encourage you to find out a little more for yourselves. Well, that's another month over and done with. Do please put a note in your diary to keep me company again for our May episode. I know one of the articles will intrigue you. It's the voice of Winston Churchill, amongst many others. And that's all I'm telling you for now. Until then, this is Maggie West signing off. Thanks to our guests for sharing their stories with us, and to our reporters, Susie Hodges and Bob Wells, who's done a sterling job yet once again as editor and producer. Please do join me next month, same time, same place. Bye for now.